he thought it was going to be large enough.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm staying in. I was facilitating the last session, but I had to actually set up this session because it had been closed out. So if you need me to set up breakout rooms, I can do that.
Okay. Well, the first question I'm going to ask is, how many of you have mental health advisors on your committees? Show of hands. Okay. So I think because the numbers are low, I'm going to keep it everybody in the same room, and so that those of us that have mental health advisors can share our experiences with the rest of you, because I went into the very first chat room and I was there to learn, and so was everybody else. There was one person that had. So I think that's what we'll do. So I want to thank you for attending. I hope that you have attended the other two sessions and have enjoyed it and gotten some stuff out of the sessions. And I hope that, oh, Linda Cron. Hi, Linda. Linda used to be a member of my Rotary Club, and now she moved to Vancouver Island. And so I haven't seen Linda in a long time. So it's nice to see a familiar face. So would somebody care to be the recorder and just take notes in the chat room, in the chat set?
I can do that for you because I'm just here to help. So
I appreciate that, Marla. Thank you so much. So the topic today is why should we provide mental health care to participants on exchange and upon return? So, and I think I wrote down some other questions as well. And what situations would you call a mental health advocate? And maybe where do we find mental health advocates, and would they need to be a Rotarian? So, John, I saw your hand up. You're muted. Everybody, yeah. just unmute yourself, everybody, and then we can have easy. We're a small group. Okay, John.
Why do you need mental health advisors? Let me tell you a very brief story. We're in Arizona, Phoenix area. One of our youth exchange girls, without permission of anyone but her host family, went to Las Vegas with a couple other girls. She had a mental health breakdown, suicidal ideation, and all that. The parents back in Europe refused to pay for anything. The health insurance did not cover it. And so for 10 years, as the youth services chair in the pre-merger district, I had to carry $20,000 in the account over year after year because of all the bills that came in. That's half the story. The other half was we got her back and we're very unsure what to do with her because her host family said, I don't think I want a suicidal girl living with me. So we had the two problems, the financial problems. Eventually, the doctor, the hospital, the psychiatric center, and everybody dropped all the charges. But it was a big chunk of our district budget if we had to pay those bills. And the Rotary four-way test pretty much obligated us that is it fair to all concerned, and we couldn't make the parents in Europe pay. The other problem was much more difficult, and I was police chief. I had a psychologist on staff who said, look, I'll help you all I can, but I'm not a juvenile psychologist. But this girl was 17, so you know it's not like a pediatric case. So why do you need to have this advice on hand all the time? So that everybody that's involved can go through the RYE chair for the district and say, I need some help.
Right. So lots of times mental health issues for people start to emerge in the teens. And they may be starting to emerge and the parents aren't sure what's going on with the kids, So they will often send the kids on exchange, hoping that that will straighten them out, and not recognizing that that's a mental health issue that's happening. And then we get them, and you know, we're dealing with situations that John had to deal with. And, you know, or they get sent home early because they're not fitting in, they're not coping, whatever. And lots of times, if you have a mental health advocate, you can connect them, and things come to light a lot quicker. I looked for several years to have a mental health advocate, and got one last year, who joined the committee, and COVID hit. And I can tell you, she was kept pretty busy because we had students that chose to stay in their country rather than come home. We had students come home early that had a lot to deal with. Our district chose to keep our inbound students until we felt it was safer for them to travel home. And they started leaving in June. So we had the mental health person keeping tabs on our inbounds, because of course the stress of them being here and their parents maybe being in a country that was being hit hard was very stressful on them. So I was so grateful that she came onto our committee when she did, because we had her really busy.
You know,
Who else?
I think too, sometimes they can be really serious and things, but a lot of times, you know, most students, most people experience experience anxiety, experience homesickness, experience, you know, even some of just those basic things. You know, most students deal with that. Like even in this session as adults, or, you know, some people get anxiety just speaking in groups. And so you think about how a teen would feel in that situation if they've never done it before.
Yeah.
So I think some of the things, and to your point, Lorraine, about how important it is to have someone that they can talk to, or can just encourage them that these are normal things, you know, that you're experiencing, that, you know, and be able to provide that to them for their year, I think matters too.
Yeah. Speaking of that, we sent a kid out on exchange that we thought was going to be a fabulous student, and she got there, she barely landed, and she was asking to come home. She had made a huge mistake. She was going to come home, and she did everything in her power to sabotage her exchange to get sent home. The host district connected her with a mental health advocate, and that woman turned her exchange around, that she ended up completing her exchange and had a fabulous time. Now, if there hadn't been someone there for that kid to settle her down, and it was just anxiety overload, right, that she was feeling, she would have been sent home. And it felt, you know, and when a kid gets sent home, you worry about them feeling like a failure, right? I see Tom's got his hand up.
Thank you. What I'm hearing, and I think is something I'm going to try to put into play, I don't know exactly how, is to have somebody for the district that can talk, that can talk to the kids, and not about not about feeling homesick, and those are things that we're used to working with. But I can give a couple very quick examples. We had one student whose father passed away while she was on exchange. And we had another kid, if you remember, she was in Tokyo for Fukushima. And they got pulled out of there in 3 days, didn't get to see anybody, didn't get to see their friends, and suddenly, boom, they're out and their exchange is done. And she was it was very, very taxing for her. And I think we need to have somebody for those crisis situations on our side. I'm always a little bit concerned about students abroad. I have found that the counselors have been in general, have been pretty shoddy at best. And I find that most students do not do well with them. They just kind of feel like they're all about their club and not about them. And that's always been a concern of mine. And I've actually had another student who was going through a lot of issues, which she worked out ultimately on her own, but she had a lot of problems with it internally and without telling us. We didn't know, and so on. And so we need to have somebody who is a mental health professional. I don't know if there's a national organization, something like that, that we could connect to the student that is broadly designed for it, because I mean, it's also expensive and these types of services. But I think there are certain online types of things that we could do if we have it aligned with Rotary, so we're not asking clubs to take on that burden, or even districts at times, for those very special cases.
And I think Tom has touched on an important point. A lot of, in the United States, we spend a lot of time educating ourselves and having sessions like we're doing today, where we're trying to do better for the good of the order. In a lot of those foreign countries, they don't have that level of connectivity, I don't think. And so I know that we've run into a couple of situations where we've had failed exchanges where we just didn't feel like the people in the opposite district end had the skills and the ability to manage the situation. And so I think one thing that Rotary needs to do is really work on getting some sort of a program built into the exchange program that becomes some training on how to deal with this kind of stuff, so that we're all dealing with kind of a basic toolkit of resources that we can go to when we have situations where we need help.
Right. I'm just, there's a question here from Todd. It says, we have a great Rotex team. Are they a good choice for first contact, or should we start with a professional? It depends on the situation that you're dealing with. Sometimes the Rotex is more than adequate, but sometimes you need the professional first. So I think you have to weigh the options of what exactly it is that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with something that looks like depression, you may want the professional in there first. If it's homesickness, or if it's acting out with undesirable behaviors, Rotex might be a good fit. So I hope that answers your question, Todd. And then somebody has an idea, we need to have someone on the committee, or is the district prepared to deal with crisis situations? I think, like, I opted to have our mental health advocate on the youth exchange committee, rather than going with an online service, because that way then we can have them at the orientation camps, and the kids can put a face to the person before they might, and Todd, I do see you, before they might need that person. We also have our mental health person reach out on a regular basis to our outbounds for what Tom said, that often there isn't enough support, or was it Marilyn, there isn't enough support sometimes for the outbounds. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, so one of the issues that has come up and is that as well, we have the counselor situation, but the counselor still works for, I shouldn't say works, but is often perceived as part of the club. Mm-hmm. And so the student often feels that they can't really confide that well with that, because then they're going to take, they're not really an advocate. I've always preached and how I've always approached this, I've always said that I was the lawyer for the student. I'm the advocate for the student, but that's not how it works a lot of the time. And so having somebody like a mental health advocate who is not actually associated with the club or with Rotary for that matter, who can really be somebody they feel that they can talk to without repercussions, because so many students are so concerned that if they say something wrong or something, they're going to go home. And that's like the last thing they want to see happen to them. So,
John, I saw that.
Yes, I have. having been through this once before, one of the issues that came up, we had a Rotarian who was a PhD in psychology and so professionally qualified. She asked her insurer, would it be covered if she did it as a volunteer? And the insurer came back and said, maybe if you get sued. They said, if it's clearly a professional relationship, it's fact-based. And it probably doesn't make any difference whether you get paid for it, but the insurer said, charge $1 just so they're on a retainer. And that makes it more likely in a fact-based situation that the psychologist, the social worker, whoever you have, would feel more comfortable helping with the situation, knowing they're not going to get a multi-million-dollar lawsuit served against them, and perhaps outside the bounds of what RI will provide legal defense for.
Okay. See, being Canadian, I don't think like that. That's a good point. So, you know, I kind of touched on when a student gets sent home. How do you think that kid is feeling? And would you call in your mental health for them? Yes, Vicky.
Yeah, well, you need to talk to them first, and you need to attempt to assess on your own. Or in the earlier conversation, session 2, there was discussion about your gut feelings. Rotarians are pretty good with their gut feelings about things. And I think that if you have any inclination whatsoever that this student needs to seek professional help, you should not hesitate. Furthermore, I feel very strongly about having questions on applications. We need to scrutinize so closely who we send abroad that we need to find out, without saying, do you have any history of, because parents may see that as such a negative and eschew an answer like that. However, you can ask, have you been treated for anxiety, or have you been treated for depression? And if you find that's the case, do not send them abroad, because we've had more than one instance of students coming here that never should have been sent, and their applications indicated that they had issues with depression or anxiety. Then when they're away from home, it can frequently exacerbate.
How well, you know, my daughter suffered from depression, and she was on medication for depression, and she went on exchange, and she coped beautifully. So I think you have to look at individual kids. Yes, John.
I just know that we've had 2 really bad experiences, and I'm a
Yeah.
psychologist.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank
Well,
you.
having a problem like that to deal with in my own family, what I've seen and what we've used as criteria for another exchange program we have with Canada and Mexico that isn't youth exchange is find out, are they, is the medication successfully controlling? So you're not at the phase. One of the kids we had said, well, my meds aren't working, so I'm going to see the doctor next week. And she said she's going to prescribe something else. Well, that's not a situation where we want them to go even for 2 weeks.
No, they need to be stable. They definitely.
Or that they start self-medicating. We've had that problem.
Yeah.
I'm sure, yes.
Yeah. And then you run into risk factors, don't you, when that happens?
Because it could be with an illegal substance.
Right. Yeah. So definitely it sounds like the, you know, having mental health care for our exchange students, it sounds like is a definite positive here that we need to do this. You know, what about your introverted students that Now, Vicky, you're a psychologist. Would you recommend hooking them up with an advocate just to help them step out of their box a little bit more?
Yes, however, what we also do is try to get them to bond with a peer, with someone their own age, because an adult professional is great when it's indicated to have one. However, what we really, and we've had all issues all over the board, so that one as well. And an extremely introverted student that didn't want to go anywhere, didn't want to participate in group activities at all, tried 3 different families before somehow, some way, we found another teen her age that she finally clicked with. But let me tell you, we invested so much time. I mean, talk about high maintenance. You really, you just have to pull out all the stops and try anything and everything. And it can take a while. And sometimes you can't find the connection because they're way too homesick and never should have come, or, so it just depends on the student.
Right.
But always call in a professional if you're unable to find a peer that the student can connect with.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or?
I have a question. So how does it work if you're sending a kid abroad that's on medication that's successfully working? Do they get a prescription for 9 months, or do they try to get it over there in the country they're at? How does that work?
Generally, the students take their medication with them for the year, for
Okay.
the duration of their exchange, and the doctors will set that up with the pharmacy so that they can do that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And also, we've sent a couple of students that had some mental health issues, and we were made very aware right off the bat. And they stayed in touch with their counselor, their mental health counselor, while they were on exchange for the whole time that they were on exchange. And they actually had very successful exchanges. One of the students was OCD and was working very hard with his OCD tendencies, and had a counselor, and that counselor agreed to be there for him 24/7 while he was on exchange, and he did amazing because he had the support. So that's something else that we need to look into with our students when we're interviewing them, and stuff that comes out, right, that they have these conditions, because I believe they can still go on exchange as long as the supports are in place for them at home, as well as with their host country, right? That we make them aware, and that this is what we have in place. And if they have anything that they could do to enhance that as well for the student, it's about setting the student up for success rather than failure. Linda, you got something, some words of wisdom here?
No, I don't think I do. A couple of the ones that we had in the past that I didn't feel that I really did as much as I could have for, like our lost student and so on. But I think your counselor idea is an absolutely amazing one, and that's one that we should all be looking into.
Todd.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted. Have we touched on supporting the students when they get back? I know for some of the students that's more challenging than being abroad.
You know what? You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And that's another area that we can definitely use the mental health. I mean, when the kids come home, the outbound counselor is supposed to be connecting with them when they're home and supporting them. I automatically had our mental health advisor reach out to all the rebounds when they get home and just saying, I'm here for you. And she'll do it 3 times. And if they don't respond at all, she doesn't worry about them, but often the kids will have a couple of sessions with her just to help them work through some of that. And sometimes for the kids, their rebound culture shock doesn't hit them for 4 or 5 months when they have that crash and burn. So, it's important to let the mental health advisor know that they might, it might be a while before they connect with you, because for some kids, it's later when that rebound culture shock hits. Yes, Todd.
Yeah, so I know in our district, we set a strong expectation that it's youth exchanges of 3 years, 1 year to get ready,
Yeah.
1 year to be on an exchange, and then 1 year to help the next group going out get ready.
Yeah.
And that gives us both the opportunity of having a better Rotary contact with our returning exchange students, but it also lets us keep an eye on them and know what's going on. And Mike Markley, you might know of him through NIAN. He has set up kind of a weekend retreat for the return within a month of when everybody returns. He gets them all together and they just kind of spend time talking about the experience to acclimate. And that seems to be very powerful.
Great. Yeah. Sometimes those rebounds kids struggle more on their return than when they did on exchange. That's definitely true. I know my daughter struggled hugely and on her return for that whole year that she had to come back and do her grade 12 year, and she just hated it because she'd been on exchange for independent, and now she was back in high school with what she considered the grade 11s when they were actually in grade 12, right? But that in her mind, they were younger than her. And and she let me know every day until she graduated. My other daughter came home, didn't say a word, quietly went through her year, hit graduation, and went, oh, I'm so glad the year's over. And that's the only thing I knew about how she was disliking her year. So and they're all different, right? And they're all going to react different. Christy, we haven't heard from you. You're muted.
Yeah, for this session, I just really have a lot to learn. We've spent some outbounds that we knew had some mental health challenges, and some have done well, others not. A bigger struggle in our district has been outright lying on the application.
Yeah.
We had bulimia discovered in Thailand with a student that they found over 20 bottles of vomit stacked in her room. And then we had one that had a very big mental health challenge in Poland, ran off into the woods for no reason, apparently naked, just terrified her host family. And the mother was a pharmacist that was sending her the medication while she was abroad, but nobody told us.
Yeah.
Told the host family or anything. I mean, just these crazy stories that we try to tell people within our orientations. This is why we ask these questions, because we have to make sure that we're putting everybody in a safe place, that we're covering all bases and doing the right thing. But they know that if they say, yes, we have a mental health challenge, then they're going to get rejected.
I've had some exchange students that have come to our community that have told me that when they go through the application process and the interview process, and that they actually meet with psychologists for several hours. They have these very intense meetings with psychologists to make sure that these kids are okay to go out. And I'm kind of wondering if this isn't something that we should be considering when we send our kids out. Like, so having a mental health advocate, they can, certainly doesn't have to be as intense as what some of the kids go through. But, if you have an advisor on your committee, you can have them check in with the students and with the parents, right? And they might be able to pick up on something that we miss.
Yeah, we haven't had that, but that's certainly something, sounds like we need to look into. And
Mhm.
someone else asked the question, should Rotary International require the mental health services as part of our health insurance policies? Well, that sounds like an obvious yes to me, if we can find insurance carriers to do more coverage for
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
But I don't know how we would get that information to them or that request to them, but yeah.
Well, do most
Seems
of
to
you
me-
go through, do most of you go through CISI?
Yeah.
We
Yes.
go through the other one, the RMCD or
Okay.
whatever, but we only have the two options.
But yeah, it would be worth talking to your carriers to see if they would put that into their insurance
Coverage.
policies.
They do have some coverage, but the fear is what the gentleman mentioned at the beginning. What happens if there is this episode that costs thousands and thousands of dollars and the parents won't pay for it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully you can catch it before you get to that point that you can send them home. Because again, I sometimes question with parents aren't sending these kids on exchange in hopes to fix the problem.
Correct. Right. Yeah. And it never does. It just makes it worse. Although sometimes that's good for the kid because it brings it to an awareness of other people who can
Yeah.
help them get the help that they need. And I know that we've had a couple of rebounds, short exchanges that came back that were ended because the kids desperately needed some help and we were able to get that for them. And then they were able to start their adult lives, in a much better place than they would have been without it. So.
Mhm. Mhm. So I haven't heard from, and I don't know how to say your name. Is it Chessa?
Yeah, the mental health issue is difficult while they're here and when they go. And very often they mask that before they leave. We had a student who did very well. She and her mother were so excited for her getting there. By the time she arrived in Czechoslovakia, she had already thrown up 3 times and did nothing but look for reasons to come home. I'm a tall girl. There's a queen bed in the next room, but they give me this short bed. The family won't speak English. Everybody smells. It just went on. And we finally said, okay, you can come home if you want. And that was so unexpected. She was a star student. So when they're masking that kind of behavior, you do wonder, is it the parent who's going on the trip or the child?
Well, yeah, I mean, you get so many situations where, yeah, there's that kind of relationship between the two of them, and you almost have to sort of interview and understand that too, because that's very much a part of the process of sending the student. And if you've got a kind of a codependent situation going on, it can make things rather interesting at times.
Yeah.
And mask it well.
John?
One of the things you have to be prepared for is the shock in an interview, whether it's for youth exchange or some other overseas, where they disclose things. And yet I've asked them, do your parents know this? About the extreme agitation and other things. And I had one of our great Interact district leaders tell me, no, my dad just had a stroke. My mother's a nervous wreck and I can't tell anyone. So I'm telling you, plural, the ones that were on the interview. And wow, does that put a burden on us of what to do?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be prepared. That's my message.
Yeah.
Think about what if you get a disclosure that is actionable.
Yeah, Linda, yes.
You mentioned before about the students coming back, and one thing that I experienced that I wasn't prepared for was that the student was afraid to go back home because they were being bullied in their high school. They had a year in a comfortable situation in their exchange, and they had to go back to this school, and nobody in their home club recognized what was going on either. So no one was helping them at all. And they literally sat down in the airport and refused to, they started crying, refused to get on the plane to come home. And it was just absolute terror of what was going to happen to them when they got there. Yeah. So sometimes you have to ask questions that, the kids that you don't think to ask and that they are afraid to offer.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, with the mental health advocate on your team, they can check in with your inbounds and outbounds a couple of times a year, and they may find out stuff that we're not going to find out. And the gentleman that has already left, where was I going with that now? Oh, sometimes the kids are afraid to talk to you, like if you're the counselor or you're the youth exchange officer, because they perceive that you're friends with the host families or you're friends with the teachers, or so if they have a struggle, they don't want to bring it to you because you're friends with those people.
Right.
And so if you have somebody that is neutral to them, that isn't perceived as a friend to the
Either
youth,
side.
yeah, they're going to be far more ready to talk. Yes,
One of the
John.
big issues is the privacy issue, because mental health professionals are very tightly proscribed of who they can tell things. And even if you're paying for the treatment, that doesn't mean you're entitled to the details. And for the most part, my experience is they say, we will only tell the natural parents. And if the natural parents are in Europe or Asia someplace, then they say, that's all I can tell. I can't tell you locally here my opinion, my findings. I can't even tell you what the recommended treatment is. So you have to make sure you've got a plan for who are they going to give the information to, and how will you be able to get it so you can act on it.
That's a very good point. Vicki, I saw you next, and then
I find that interesting because we are the designated guardians.
Yeah.
Right.
Be it the counselors, the district committee, and the students' host family. We are the guardians. We're the guardians for their mental health and their physical health and well-being. That's a weird statement.
Well, it's not weird because it's happened. Here's the thing. They say there's only 2 parents. There's not 5 parents. There's not a counselor and a host family and a this and a that. And so I've been through this, and you can work it out. They're not being obstinate, but they have their professional responsibility. And the idea of telling a counselor, a club youth exchange officer, and others is likely to be problematic because they don't understand the system, even if you produce a document.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Vicki.
Yeah, and a way around that could be to get the buy-in of the student themselves. Is it okay for me to discuss this? That way you can get around it. But I totally agree. Whatever is going to transpire with this student here, you need to be in ongoing communication with their natural parents, with their birth parents and their home country. I agree with John entirely. And depending on the age of the student, of course, if they're over 18, I guess all the students we're talking about that were under 18. So yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's a good point, getting the student to agree to I need to bring this to whatever.
I'm concerned about you. And because I'm concerned about you, I want to develop as wide of a support system as possible. Therefore, do I have your permission to discuss with your host family what you're telling me? They really care about you and they want to help too. So you have to, so much of it is the way you phrase things,
right,
so that they feel the love and the support coming.
Right. Good. We've had some really great discussion here. And so we've got 4 minutes left. This is your last chance to bring anything forward that you would like. Well, if there's nothing coming, thank you everyone for attending this. I hope you gained some insight and some good tips and that on this. I hope you've enjoyed this session as much as I've enjoyed this session. I hope you've enjoyed this conference as much as I've enjoyed this conference. If any of you have questions down the road and would like to connect with someone, we have everybody's email address and information, I believe, and it'll be kept for a little while. I would go through Art, which I believe you were getting emails from Art, and then he can direct where that email needs to go. Thank you for giving up your morning for us, and we hope to have another virtual conference next year, and I hope to see all of your faces next year. And I don't know what it'll look like next year, but it should be fun.
Lorraine.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
A quick comment, Lorraine.
Yes.
If anybody wants the chat, you can go into the chat window. There's 3 dots, click on it and say copy to my machine. And you
Okay.
can get notes from this.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, thank
know,
you. I've
and
been
it-
wondering
the-
how that worked.
Well, and it's also going to be on the Zone website with all the chat as well. It's all going to be there. So
Yeah, from each session, all the sessions. So
for
even
all the
when
session,
people
yes.
attend. Yeah.
So you click on the 3 dots and then what?
Save.
Mine says
Save.
save chat,
Save
I
chat
don't
on a
I
Mac.
don't see that there.
Mine just came
where
up.
it says to and it says everyone, and you can
Where
type
you would enter a comment. If you go to the right, it has the box with the 3 little dots.
You might need to first
Yeah.
click on the chat in the main window with the people's pictures,
Thanks,
people's
Todd.
video.
I learned something.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm the Zoom master for our club meetings, so
Good for
Ah,
you.
I'm unfortunately
good.
familiar with this.
Thank you so much, everyone. Nice meeting you. Enjoy
Thank
your
you.
day.
Everyone.
Great track, Lorraine. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Todd. Yeah, I had a sleepless night. I wasn't sure how this was going to work.
Oh, you always do well.
Thanks, Linda. Good to see you, Linda.
Yes, and this is my first year as being the director of youth services, so I'm really on a learning curve this year. Even though I've been the youth exchange committee for many years, there's so much more involved
Sure.
than just exchange.
Yeah,
So-
well, I'm the district youth service chair this year. So,
Yeah, are you?
yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, well, I'll just have to contact you whenever I have a problem.
well, there you go. It'd be great to connect. Alrighty, thanks, everybody.
Bye.